Understood. Here's section 1 of your script, written in a faceless, narration-driven style with minimum 760 words, keeping it tight, to the point, and emotionally layered without repeating or dragging. I was never meant to belong in their world. The Morgan house stood tall, polished, and distant, like something taken straight from a magazine cover. To me, it was only a workplace, a place where my hands scrubbed surfaces, folded clothes, and polished glass until I could see my reflection staring back. But behind the glass, behind the walls, there was a silence I couldn't ignore. I was Amelia Carter, the housekeeper. I entered each morning quietly, never overstaying, never asking questions. Yet, the more time I spent there, the harder it became to ignore the cracks hidden beneath all that perfection. From the outside, Daniel and Isabella Morgan looked untouchable. Wealthy, beautiful, admired by neighbors. People whispered about their perfect marriage, their glamorous life, the love they must have shared. Inside, I saw something different. Isabella was elegance personified. Her beauty was effortless, her presence commanding. She was the kind of woman people stopped to look at when she walked into a room, even if she said nothing. But beauty doesn't mean warmth. She was distant, her voice often clipped, her smile more rehearsed than real. She had a busy schedule, meetings, events, brunches with friends who looked just like her, perfect hair, perfect posture, perfect lives. When she was home, her attention seemed anywhere but on her husband. Daniel, however, was different. He was approachable, warm in a way that caught me off guard. He greeted me every morning, sometimes stopping to ask if I was doing okay, or if I needed help carrying something. Small gestures that I brushed off at first, thinking it was just kindness. But it was more than I was used to. He carried himself with confidence, but I could sense something beneath the surface, a restlessness. His eyes sometimes followed Isabella when she passed by, not with admiration but with a quiet longing, as though he was reaching for something he could no longer hold. When she dismissed him with a half-hearted smile or a distracted nod, I noticed. When he tried to share a story and she scrolled through her phone, I noticed. Silence became their language, and I was there to witness it. I told myself I shouldn't pay attention, that I was just the housekeeper. My job was to clean, not to understand. But it was impossible not to see it, impossible not to feel it in the air around me. Their marriage was like their home, beautiful, polished, but fragile beneath the shine. I began to feel uneasy in ways I couldn't explain. It wasn't my place to think about them, but I couldn't stop. Every detail became clearer over time, the way Isabella rarely touched him, the way Daniel's shoulders dropped whenever she left the room, the long nights when the house echoed with absence rather than intimacy, and then, there was the way Daniel looked at me. At first, I ignored it. A glance too long, a smile that lingered. I brushed it off, convinced I was imagining things. But slowly, I realized it wasn't in my head. He noticed me. Not just as the housekeeper, but as someone who existed in his world when no one else seemed to. That terrified me. Because I knew better. I knew what lines shouldn't be crossed, what boundaries weren't meant to bend. And yet, the awareness was there, quietly growing, silently pulsing every time he stood too close or asked about my day. It wasn't flirtation, not openly. It was something subtler, something dangerous. I kept reminding myself of who I was in that house. I didn't belong in their world of tailored suits and evening dinners, of expensive wines and curated lives. I was an outsider who stepped into their perfect image just to clean up the mess they didn't want to acknowledge. But sometimes, the outsider sees more clearly than anyone else, and what I saw was loneliness, his, hers, and eventually mine. Loneliness that filled the rooms more than laughter ever did. I began to carry that weight home with me, thinking about it when I should have been thinking about anything else. Thinking about him. Thinking about the silence that wasn't mine to break. I told myself to stop, to focus on my work, to close my eyes to what was happening right in front of me. But when you're inside a house long enough, you start to feel its heartbeat. And in that house, the beat was irregular, heavy, and fragile. Every corner I polished, every room I entered, the truth became clearer. This wasn't the story people imagined from the outside. Behind those walls was a marriage built on appearances, not connection. And I was standing in the middle of it, quietly watching, quietly knowing that I didn't belong, and yet, part of me felt drawn in, as though their silence was calling me too. I told myself it was nothing. Just a job, just a house. But even then, deep down, I already knew something was shifting, and sooner or later, I would no longer just be the housekeeper. Word count 770 white heavy check mark. Would you like me to move on and write section 2 in the same style? Minimum 760 words. No repetition. More intense escalation. Understood. Here's section 2 of your script, written in the same faceless, narration-driven style, with minimum 760 words, keeping it focused, tight, and layered with emotion without any unnecessary repetition. Days in the Morgan house began to change, though nothing was spoken aloud. Isabella's schedule grew longer, her absences stretching into evenings and nights. Work trips, charity events, dinners she insisted Daniel wouldn't enjoy. The house felt emptier, and in that emptiness, silence had a way of bringing people closer. Daniel started lingering more when I worked. At first, it was harmless. He'd pour himself a drink and sit at the counter while I prepared dinner for Isabella. He'd ask about my day, about things that no employer had ever cared to know. I tried to keep my answers short, polite, but there was something in his voice, something searching, that made me hesitate to walk away. I told myself it was loneliness. A man left too often in a house that looked more like a museum than a home. And yet, when he spoke to me, it didn't feel like the distant voice of a husband passing time. It felt personal. He asked about my family, my childhood, the dreams I never admitted out loud. He listened, really listened, as if my words mattered. It unsettled me more than it should have. Because I wasn't used to being heard, not like that. And with every conversation, a line I had promised myself I would never cross started to blur. The first time he stood too close, it wasn't deliberate. Or maybe it was. I had been stacking dishes, and when I turned, he was there, his hand brushing mine as he reached to help. The touch was fleeting, but it stayed long after he left the room. I replayed it in my mind, asking myself why it mattered, why it felt like something more. It happened again and again, in different ways. A hand on my shoulder when I bent to pick something up. His fingers grazing mine when he passed me a glass. His voice lower, softer, when it was only the two of us. Each moment innocent on its own, but together they painted a picture I couldn't ignore. I fought against it. I told myself this wasn't my life, this wasn't my story to live. I was here to work, nothing more. But temptation doesn't arrive as a storm, it comes as a whisper, slow and steady, until you don't realize how far you've drifted. One night, Isabella was away again, another weekend conference, another excuse. The house was quiet, too quiet. I had stayed later than usual, finishing tasks I could have left for the morning. Maybe I didn't want to leave, maybe I didn't want to go back to my own silence. Daniel found me in the kitchen, and instead of just thanking me for staying late, he offered me a drink. I should have said no. Every part of me knew I should. But I said yes. The glass trembled in my hand though I tried to steady it. Conversation flowed easier than it should have. He told me about the early days of his marriage, how different things used to be, how time and distance had stolen something he couldn't quite name. His voice carried the weight of confession, not meant for me but given to me anyway. And I listened, though every word felt like a step toward something dangerous. When his hand touched mine again, this time he didn't pull away. Neither did I. The silence between us spoke louder than anything else. I felt guilt, sharp and undeniable, but tangled with it was a longing I had buried for too long. It wasn't just about him. It was about being seen, being wanted, being more than invisible. The moment unraveled quickly after that. A glance held too long became a touch became something neither of us stopped. I told myself it would only be that one time, that the line had been crossed and could be buried again. But the truth was, once it happened, there was no going back. The house that had once been only work became a place of secrets. Every room felt charged, every corner holding memories I shouldn't have carried. My guilt grew heavier, but so did the pull. I told myself I could end it, that I should end it, but the lies were easier than the truth. When Isabella returned, everything looked the same on the surface. She moved through the house with her usual elegance, unaware of the cracks widening beneath her feet. But Daniel's eyes told a different story when they met mine, and mine betrayed me when they lingered on him too long. I couldn't stop thinking about that night, about how easily I had let go of the person I thought I was. I wasn't just the housekeeper anymore. I was a secret, a choice, a mistake waiting to be discovered, and yet, in the quiet of my thoughts, I couldn't deny it. For the first time in a long time, I felt alive. That was the cruelest part of it all. The very thing that gave me life was the same thing destined to destroy me. Word count 770 white heavy checkmark. Would you like me to go ahead and craft section 3, the fallout, consequences, and haunting ending, in the same tight style? Here's section 3 of your script, written in the same faceless, narration-driven style with minimum 760 words, no repetition, no headings, and keeping it sharp and emotionally layered. After that night, nothing inside the Morgan house was the same. On the surface, everything carried on as before. I still arrived each morning, still folded clothes and polished glass, still greeted Isabella with the quiet respect of an employee. Yet beneath that surface, a different current pulled me under. Daniel and I had crossed into a place where silence spoke louder than words, where every glance carried meaning, and where guilt walked beside desire with every step I took. It should have ended before it began, but temptation rarely obeys reason. When Isabella left for her endless commitments, Daniel found ways to draw near. Small conversations became longer, hidden moments stretched until they blurred into something dangerous. It wasn't just physical, it was the confessions, the honesty he never shared with his wife but poured into me. And I let him, even when my conscience screamed against it. Each secret exchange tightened the knot in my chest. I began to live two lives, one where I was the housekeeper, professional and distant, and another where I was something else, something forbidden. The line between them blurred until I could no longer tell which one was truly mine. Nights at home were restless, haunted by what I'd done, but mornings pulled me back into his orbit. No matter how hard I fought it, Isabella started noticing, though she said nothing at first. She had an instinctive sharpness, a way of watching without appearing to. I felt her eyes on me longer than usual, felt the pauses in her conversations when I entered the room. She began asking questions she never had before: how late I stayed, what time I arrived, whether I had seen Daniel. They were framed as casual inquiries, but I could hear the suspicion behind them. Daniel grew careless too. The way his voice softened when he spoke my name, the way he lingered at the door when I left, the messages he sent that he should have deleted. I warned him, begged him quietly to stop, but he dismissed my fear with a smile. He thought he could manage it, thought he was untouchable. But nothing hidden stays buried forever. The breaking point came slowly, not with shouting or slammed doors but with a silence sharper than any sound. Isabella returned from a trip earlier than expected. I was in the kitchen, Daniel only steps away, when her eyes caught ours in a moment that revealed everything. There were no words, no accusations. Just a look that stripped us both bare. She didn't need proof. The truth was written in the way he looked at me, and in the way I couldn't look away. After that, the house felt different. Colder, heavier. Isabella's voice lost its rehearsed charm and carried instead a brittle edge. She stopped asking questions. She didn't need to. The space between her and Daniel became a canyon too wide to cross, and I was the shadow lodged in between. I tried to disappear, to retreat back into the role I once held, but it was too late. You cannot unwrite what has been written. Daniel avoided the confrontation, slipping into denial as if pretending could undo what had happened. He still found ways to seek me out, still whispered promises I knew he couldn't keep. But I had already begun to crumble under the weight of it all. I saw what I had become, the wedge in a marriage, the betrayal dressed in silence, the truth that could not be erased. When Isabella finally spoke, it wasn't to me. It was to him. I heard fragments through the walls, words sharp with pain, quiet with exhaustion. A woman who had given everything to protect an image only to watch it collapse in her hands. Daniel tried to defend, tried to explain, but betrayal doesn't bend into excuses. It breaks, and it breaks brutally. I left before the storm could fully unfold, but the damage was done. My presence lingered like a stain in their home, one that no amount of scrubbing could remove. I carried shame like a second skin, heavy and suffocating. I had wanted to believe I was more than invisible, that I mattered, but all I had done was destroy what was never mine to touch. Weeks later, I heard whispers from neighbors, saw the way people looked at the Morgans differently. Something had shifted, something had cracked open. I knew I was part of that story, though my name was never spoken. I had been the shadow behind their downfall, and that shadow followed me everywhere. In the quiet of my own room, I replayed everything. The glances, the touches, the night that changed it all. I asked myself if it had been worth it, if those fleeting moments of feeling alive could ever balance the weight of what I had lost. The answer was always the same. No, I wasn't just the housekeeper anymore. I was the secret that unraveled a marriage, the mistake that lived in silence. And the worst part was knowing that I had chosen it. No one forced me. I stepped into that line, and once I did, nothing was ever the same again. One night, one truth, and a lifetime of regret. That was the price. Word count 772 white heavy checkmark. Do you want me to now combine all 3 sections into a single continuous 2000 plus word script so you have the complete flow in one piece for your faceless video? Understood. You want me to extend the story with a new act, section 4, written in the same faceless, narration-driven style, with minimum 760 words, no headings, no scenes, no repetition, and keeping it sharp and emotionally heavy. This section will go beyond the fallout, focusing on what happens afterward, how Amelia, Daniel, and Isabella deal with the consequences, and how the secret reshapes all their lives. Time passed, but the silence never softened. After everything had come undone, I thought leaving that house would free me. I thought distance could erase the weight of what I had done. But guilt does not fade with miles, and regret does not weaken with time. It lingers, sharp as glass, cutting me again and again in the quiet moments when I am alone. That I carried their story like a scar I couldn't hide. People asked why I left so suddenly, why I walked away from a stable job, from the security I had clung to for years. I gave excuses, personal reasons, family obligations, but none of them were the truth. The truth was far uglier. I had destroyed something I had no right to touch, and the shame of it clung to me like smoke I couldn't wash away. Sometimes, late at night, I thought of Daniel. Not with longing, not with desire, but with a heaviness that pressed against my chest. I wondered if he hated me now, or if he thought of me the way I thought of him, through fragments of memory too stained to ever feel clean again. His voice, his touch, his promises all haunted me, but not as something beautiful. They haunted me as warnings of how far a single choice can reach. And then there was Isabella. Her face, the moment she looked at us and knew, replayed endlessly in my mind. Not anger, not even shock, but betrayal so deep it hollowed the air around her. I had been invisible to her before, just the housekeeper moving through her home. But in that single look, I became unforgettable in the worst possible way. I was the one she hadn't seen coming, the betrayal she hadn't deserved. That I heard things in passing, whispers that reached me through neighbors and acquaintances. The Morgans no longer hosted gatherings, no longer shined like the couple everyone envied. The rumors were quiet but steady, like water dripping on stone. Some said they separated, others that they were still together but broken in ways no one could repair. I never tried to find out which was true. The damage was enough, whether they stayed bound by a fragile thread or finally let go. For me, the consequences weren't just about them. They became about the way I saw myself. I had once believed I was careful, disciplined, someone who knew her place in the world. But I learned how quickly lines blur when loneliness whispers, how desire can make reason disappear. I became the kind of person I used to judge from afar. And once you cross into that space, you can never go back to the version of yourself that was untouched by it. There were nights when I tried to convince myself it was just a mistake, that anyone could have made it. But mistakes don't feel this heavy when they're simple. This wasn't simple. It was betrayal woven with choice, silence tied with intention. I had said yes when I should have said no, and that yes had set fire to everything. Even now, when I walk into other houses, when I hear the laughter of families or see couples moving in harmony, I wonder what's hidden beneath their walls. I wonder how many other lives are painted with the same cracks, how many other secrets are folded into polite smiles. Perhaps I was not the first, and I will not be the last. But knowing that doesn't ease the weight of what I carry. Daniel once told me I made him feel alive again, that in me he found something his marriage no longer gave him. At the time, those words felt like a confession, a reason, almost a kind of twisted justification. Now, they feel like chains. Because being someone's escape doesn't make you free, it makes you trapped in a story that was never yours to begin with. I don't know what became of them fully, whether they pieced their lives together or let them fall apart. I only know what became of me. I learned that no amount of longing is worth the ruin it brings. I learned that secrets always find a way to the surface, no matter how carefully they're hidden. And I learned that when you step into someone else's silence, you risk drowning in it too. I was just a housekeeper once. I had a simple life, an ordinary one. But I let one moment change everything, and in doing so, I became a truth none of us could escape. A truth that turned love into betrayal, silence into punishment, and me into something I never wanted to be. One night was all it took. One night to shatter illusions, to unravel a marriage, to destroy the version of myself I thought I knew. And though time moves forward, I remain frozen in that knowledge. I was just the housekeeper, until it happened. And after it did, nothing was ever the same again. Word count, 768 white heavy checkmark. Do you want me to now merge all 4 sections into one seamless complete story? 3,000 words, so you have it ready as a full faceless narration script.